the inferior vena cava. Contraction of the right atrium in each cardiac cycle forces blood into the right ventricle. This is followed by contraction of the right ventricle, which pumps blood into the pulmonary artery, sending it on through the blood vessels of the lungs. As the right ventricle contracts and pressure within the right ventricle rises, the tricuspid valve situated at the opening between the right atrium and right ventricle shuts, preventing any backflow. The pressure generated by contraction of the right ventricle soon opens the pulmonary valve and blood enters the circulation of the lungs. After passing through the circulation of the lungs, the blood, having been recharged with oxygen and having rid itself of carbon dioxide, is returned through the pulmonary veins to the left atrium. The left atrium, too, contracts, forwarding blood into the left ventricle in order to fill it before it contracts. As the powerful left ventricle contracts, the mitral valve shuts, preventing backflow into the left atrium. The aortic valve opens and blood is forced into the aorta, which distributes it to the rest of the body apart from the lungs. As the contraction comes to an end and pressure in the aorta falls, the aortic valve snaps shut to prevent backflow into the left ventricle. All cells need oxygen. It is the essential fuel which is necessary to enable cells to stay alive and to carry out their various activities. Bringing oxygen to the cells requires the uptake of oxygen from the air in the lungs, its transportation in the blood, and its delivery to cells all over the body. The first step is the taking up of oxygen by blood flowing through fine capillaries in the walls of the lungs' air sacs, or alveoli. The oxygen molecules change from their state as a gas freely circulating in the air, dissolving into a solution in the plasma within the capillaries of the alveoli. Once in the solution of the blood, 98% of this dissolved oxygen is taken up by passing red cells, leaving just 2% remaining in the physical solution unattached. Red cells are particularly well suited to transporting oxygen because they contain a special oxygen-binding protein known as hemoglobin. Each molecule of hemoglobin itself contains 4 molecules of heme, an iron-containing pigment, which binds oxygen loosely and reversibly. Hemoglobin that is fully saturated with oxygen is bright red and is called oxyhemoglobin. On the other hand, hemoglobin that is not saturated with oxygen is purplish blue in color and is called deoxyhemoglobin. It is heme which makes it possible for the red cells to pick up oxygen dissolved in the blood, transport it combined with hemoglobin, and release it back into the blood as oxygen in solution, ready for delivery to the various cells of the body. Hemoglobin gives up its oxygen as red cells travel through capillaries in tissues where there is a low content or partial pressure of oxygen. The partial pressure of oxygen represents the level of dissolved oxygen in plasma. As oxygen is released and again is carried in solution, the partial pressure of oxygen in the capillaries becomes greater than the partial pressure of oxygen in the surrounding tissues. This causes oxygen to move out of the capillaries into the tissues and to finally reach the cells.
The process of exchanging gases between the atmosphere and the body's cells is called respiration and involves several events, including breathing. As we zoom into the body, we can observe the respiratory system during gas exchange. Air passes through the alveolar sacs to the alveoli, where gas exchange occurs. In this cutaway view of an alveolar sac and its capillary bed, the process of gas exchange is easily observed. During inspiration, atmosphere air fills the alveoli and gas exchange occurs between the alveolar and capillary epithelia. Oxygen in inspired air is represented as a white gas. Carbon dioxide in expired air is represented as a blue gas. Notice the changing color in the red blood cells during gas exchange. Now let's zoom into a higher magnification view of gas exchange at the respiratory membrane. Red blood cells in the capillary adjacent to the alveolus release carbon dioxide and bind oxygen.
The circulatory system, consisting of the heart, arteries, capillaries, and veins, is the pumping mechanism that transports blood throughout the body. In the heart, the left ventricle contracts, pushing red blood cells into the aorta, the body's largest artery. From here, blood moves through a series of increasingly smaller arteries until it reaches a capillary, the junction between arteries and veins. Here, oxygen molecules detach from the red blood cells and slip across the capillary wall into body tissue. Now deoxygenated, blood begins its return to the heart. It passes through increasingly larger veins to eventually reach the right atrium. It enters the right ventricle, which pumps it through the pulmonary arteries into the lungs to pick up more oxygen. Oxygenated, blood re-enters the left atrium, moves into the left ventricle, and the blood's journey begins again. To nourish the body, the digestive system breaks down food into nutrient molecules, absorbs them into the bloodstream, and eliminates food byproducts. Food moves from the mouth, passes through the esophagus, and arrives in the stomach. Here, enzymes and hydrochloric acid mix with the chewed food, churning it into a thick liquid. The liquid then enters the small intestine. Here, nutrients such as carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are reduced to tiny molecules. Along with vitamins and minerals, they leave the intestine through tiny projections called villi and cross capillary beds into the bloodstream. Undigested food moves into the large intestine and then leaves the body. Undigested food moves into the respiratory system provides oxygen to the body's cells and removes carbon dioxide. Air containing oxygen enters the body through the nose and mouth, travels through the windpipe, and into the branching airways of the lungs called bronchi. Here, through thin-walled sacs covered by capillaries, oxygen passes through the lung tissue and goes into the bloodstream, where it locks on to red blood cells. Further in the bloodstream, the blood cells squeeze through more capillaries. Here, oxygen unhooks from the red blood cells and crosses into other body cells to be used for life-maintaining chemical reactions. When this process is reversed, carbon dioxide waste from the chemical reactions enters the bloodstream and is exhaled from the body.